For centuries, Rome was not just a city, it was an idea. An idea of power, order, conquest, and civilization so strong that it reshaped the known world. From a small settlement on the banks of the Tiber River, Rome rose to command an empire that stretched across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Its armies were feared, its laws were copied, and its roads connected continents. But the same empire that seemed eternal would one day fracture, weaken, and fall. The story of Rome is not simply the story of victory. It is the story of ambition without limits. It is the story of brilliant leaders, ruthless generals, political betrayal, and a civilization so vast that its own greatness became one of its greatest burdens. To understand the rise and fall of the Roman Empire is to understand how power is built, how it is preserved, and how, in time, it slips away. Rome's beginnings were humble, but its hunger was immense. Long before emperors wore laurel crowns, Rome was a republic. It was governed by senators, magistrates, and laws that gave citizens a voice, at least in theory. But as Rome expanded, conquering neighboring territories and defeating rivals like Carthage, wealth began pouring into the city. With that wealth came inequality, corruption, and political unrest. Victorious generals returned home with loyal armies and growing ambitions. The Republic, once built on balance and restraint, became a battlefield of competing egos. Among the men who rose during this chaos was Julius Caesar, a brilliant commander and master politician. He conquered Gaul, won the loyalty of his soldiers, and became one of the most powerful men Rome had ever seen. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BC, he shattered the old political order. Civil war followed, and Caesar emerged as dictator. But in Rome, supreme power always created fear. In 44 BC, he was assassinated by senators who believed they were saving the Republic. Instead, they unleashed even greater instability. Caesar's death did not restore the old system, it destroyed what remained of it. Out of the chaos stepped Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. Young, calculating, and patient, he defeated his rivals and outmaneuvered every enemy in his path. After his victory over Mark Antony and Cleopatra, Octavian became the undisputed ruler of the Roman world. In 27 BC, he took the title Augustus, and with that, the Roman Empire was born. Augustus understood something many conquerors never learn. Raw force can seize power, but only structure can sustain it. He preserved the appearance of republican institutions while holding ultimate authority in his own hands. He reformed taxation, strengthened the military, secured the frontiers, and brought stability to a world exhausted by civil war. Under Augustus, Rome did not merely survive, it entered an age of transformation. What followed was the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, a long era in which imperial power brought relative stability to vast territories. Roads stretched across mountains and deserts. Trade flowed from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. Roman engineers built aqueducts, bridges, amphitheaters, and cities that displayed the confidence of a civilization certain of its destiny. At its height, the empire was a machine of astonishing complexity. The Roman legions enforced order with discipline and precision. Governors administered provinces in the emperor's name. Merchants, soldiers, slaves, and citizens moved across an interconnected world. Latin spread, Roman law spread, Roman culture spread. Even those Rome conquered often adopted its language, customs, and institutions. The empire was also a world of spectacle. In the heart of Rome stood the Colosseum, where gladiators fought before roaring crowds. Triumphal arches celebrated military victories. Temples honored the gods. Emperors commissioned monuments not only to inspire the people, but to remind them who held power. Rome ruled with organization, but it also ruled with theater. Yet, beneath the marble and ceremony, the empire depended on constant expansion, constant revenue, and constant military loyalty. Success created expectations that became harder to meet. Borders had to be defended, armies had to be paid, provinces had to remain obedient. The machine worked, but it demanded endless resources. After Augustus came emperors of every kind, wise rulers, cruel tyrants, reformers, and madmen. Some strengthened the empire, others nearly broke it. Emperors like Trajan expanded Rome to its greatest territorial size. Under Hadrian, borders were fortified, including the famous wall in Britain. Marcus Aurelius, philosopher and emperor, tried to preserve Roman order in an age already showing signs of strain. But even during its golden age, Rome was never invincible. Succession was often unstable. Power rarely passed peacefully. Assassinations, conspiracies, and military coups haunted imperial politics. The empire projected permanence, yet it often stood on uncertain ground. A strong emperor could hold it together. A weak one could expose every crack. In the 3rd century, those cracks widened into a crisis. Emperors rose and fell with terrifying speed. Armies declared their own commanders emperor. Civil wars drained resources. Foreign enemies pressed against the borders. Economic instability spread through the empire. Inflation damaged trade. Cities declined. Confidence in Roman power began to erode. This period nearly destroyed the empire. For decades, Rome was assaulted from within and without. Plague weakened the population. Political chaos shattered continuity. In some regions, imperial authority almost vanished altogether. What had once looked like an eternal order now seemed fragile, overstretched, and uncertain. And yet Rome adapted. Emperor Diocletian attempted a dramatic rescue. He reorganized the empire, divided administrative responsibilities, and expanded the bureaucracy and military. His reforms bought Rome time, but they also revealed a deeper truth. The empire had grown too large and too complex to govern as it once had. Rome could still survive, but only by changing. Then came Constantine, one of the most consequential rulers in Roman history. He reunited the empire after another round of civil war and embraced Christianity, changing the spiritual direction of the Roman world forever. He also founded Constantinople, a new imperial capital in the east, strategically placed between Europe and Asia. This shift mattered more than many realized at the time. The eastern provinces were wealthier, more urbanized, and often easier to defend. The west, by contrast, was increasingly vulnerable. Over time, the Roman Empire became less centered on the old city of Rome itself. Power was moving east, even as the western half struggled to maintain control. Meanwhile, pressure along the frontiers intensified. Germanic groups moved across Roman borders, sometimes as invaders, sometimes as refugees, sometimes as allies. Rome had long absorbed outsiders into its system, but now the scale of migration and conflict grew harder to manage. The empire needed soldiers, and it increasingly relied on foreign recruits whose loyalty could not always be guaranteed. In 378 AD, the Roman army suffered a devastating defeat at the Battle of Adrianople against the Goths. It was more than a military disaster. It was a warning. Rome's enemies could no longer be dismissed as scattered tribes at the edge of civilization. They could break Roman armies in open battle. Theodosius I would become the last emperor to rule both East and West before the empire was permanently divided after his death in 395. From that point on, the two halves followed different destinies. The East endured, the West entered a long decline. In the 5th century, the Western Roman Empire faced wave after wave of pressure. Political instability returned. Generals competed for influence. Emperors were made and unmade by military strongmen. Tax revenues declined. Provinces were lost. The empire still looked Roman on the surface, but much of its strength had already faded. Then came one of the most shocking moments in ancient history. In 1010 AD, the city of Rome was sacked by the Visigoths under Alaric. For 800 years, the city had not fallen to a foreign enemy. The psychological impact was enormous. Even though Rome was no longer the true center of imperial power, its violation stunned the Roman world. More invasions followed. Vandals crossed into North Africa and seized vital territories that supplied grain and wealth. In 455 AD, Rome was sacked again, this time by the Vandals. The Western government grew weaker, more dependent on barbarian generals, less capable of controlling its own lands. Imperial authority was becoming a shell. By the late 5th century, the title of emperor in the West meant less and less. Real power belonged to military commanders who used Roman institutions while hollowing them out from within. Finally, in 476 AD, the Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed Romulus Augustulus, the last Western Roman emperor. Traditionally, this event marks the fall of the Western Roman Empire. But Rome did not disappear in a single day. In the East, the empire continued for nearly 1,000 more years from Constantinople. Roman law, administration, and imperial tradition survived. Even in the West, Roman ideas lived on through the church, through language, through architecture, and through the memory of empire itself. So why did Rome fall? Historians have debated that question for centuries. There was no single cause. Rome was weakened by political instability, economic strain, military dependence on outsiders, administrative overreach, social division, and relentless external pressure. It was not one fatal blow, but a slow accumulation of burdens the Western Empire could no longer bear. Rome's greatest strength had always been its ability to adapt, absorb, and organize. But when that flexibility faltered, the empire's size turned from an advantage into a liability. Its borders became too wide, its politics became too violent, its institutions became too fragile. The machinery of empire continued to exist, but it no longer had the force to drive history as it once had. And still, the fall of Rome was not the end of its influence. In many ways, it was the beginning of Rome's second life. Roman law shaped legal systems. Roman engineering inspired future builders. Roman roads, cities, and military models left permanent marks across continents.
The Latin language evolved into the Romance languages. The dream of empire, ordered by law and protected by power, would echo through European and global history for centuries. Even modern governments still borrow Roman ideas. Senates, republics, citizenship, civil law, public works, and political symbolism all carry Roman shadows. We remember Rome not only because it conquered so much, but because it defined what civilization itself could look like for those who came after. The rise of Rome shows what discipline, ambition, and organization can achieve. Its fall shows what happens when power grows faster than the institutions meant to control it. Rome built roads across the world, but it could not always bridge the divisions within itself. It conquered nations, but it could not fully conquer corruption, instability, and decline. That is why Rome still fascinates us. It was glorious, brutal, brilliant, and deeply flawed. It reached heights few civilizations have ever matched. And when it fell, it left behind not silence, but a legacy so powerful that the world still lives among its ruins. In the broken columns of old forums, in the arches that still stand, and in the laws and languages we still use, Rome remains. Not as an empire of armies and emperors, but as a reminder. Every great power believes it will last forever. Rome did too.